Hello, this is Professor Niall Kirkwood. I'm the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs and Professor of Landscape Architecture and Technology in the Department of Landscape Architecture at the Harvard Design School in Cambridge, Massachusetts, United States. And I'd like to thank Professor Im and the organizers of the international webinar for the invitation to present my short talk to you today titled Aspects of Alleyways, Design Ideas and Innovation. The presentation has three parts as follows. Part one, it addresses the city of Edinburgh in Scotland and the alleys, closes, vennels. And I'll open with the ideas of alleys in my own hometown and how they evolved in the city historically. I'll briefly describe the simple differences between public and private ways and uncovered and covered passageways in the city fabric from its origins in the 12th century and high-density development in the 18th century. In the second part, I'll briefly discuss Patrick Geddes, who was a resident of the Old Town and who in the early 20th century, as a Scottish landscape painter, planner and designer, reclaimed the alleys and alleyways internationally, but particularly in the mid-sized towns of India. And the third and final part is concerned with the alleys and what I'm calling water alleys of Bangkok, Thailand, that were part of a graduate landscape design studio that I ran this spring in 2020. Starting with the alleys of Edinburgh in the Old City, they appear in many forms, from private alleys between buildings that have lockable gates and are known as closes, C-L-O-S-E-S, closes, to open public pedestrian alley routes up and down through the city, day and night, as shown here. And then the range of terms are defined that include alley as a passage between or behind two buildings, a wynd, W-Y-N-D, which is an open thoroughfare wide enough for a horse and a cart, to a vennel, V-E-N-N-E-L, which is wider and appears as a minor street. So these public spaces appear in the fabric of the old city that is illustrated here in this plan of Edinburgh from 1742. The fortified castle at the left denotes the high point, and the west-east Main Street or High Street descends down to the Royal Palace on the right-hand side of the plan. The land drops off north and south from the main street, so the alleyways, which contain ramps and steps, allow pedestrians to move easily through, down and across the old city. This image shows the castle at the highest point, and the land that falls away to the north to Princess Street Gardens, a major green open space. The key issues found in Edinburgh related to alleys are the integration of them into the topography and the context, private access versus public access, and how the scale and width of the alley determines its use, and therefore, by use, its naming. And more detailed plans show the location and quantity of the alleys and closes in relationship to the west-east Main Street, High Street, or the Canongate, as it changes its name. So the alleys and closes facing north and south have different characteristics, quality of light, usage, and levels of activity. On the right image is Barry's Close. You can see illustrated a typical enclosed alleyway open for full access during daylight hours that moves under and through buildings that were reconstructed around it and over it through the 17th to the 19th centuries. The changes of elevation produce alleys that are long sequences of stairs, with rooms spanning across the lane as shown on the right, or as part of the University of Edinburgh's graduate student dorms in the Old Town. The widest alley type is the vennel, which resembles a minor stepped roadway with buildings and gardens backing onto it. This one in particular was the route I myself took to elementary to high school back in the late 1950s and early 1960s. And it also followed the Flodden Wall, which is a former military fortification for the city completed in 1560. In this view of the old town, you can see the architecture stepping down the slope. And the red arrow denotes the location of the home of landscape planner and urban theorist Patrick Geddes, who lived from 1854 to 1932, and whose landscape work and studies of urban fabric, alleyways, and courtyards forms the second part of my presentation. A resident of the Edinburgh Old Town, he was a biologist, a sociologist, a geographer, a town planner, an inventor of what is called the diagnostic survey and conservative surgery in civic design, as well as the concept of the region and the regional section. He was very familiar with the alleys, closes, and vennels of his hometown of Edinburgh. And this was reflected in his international planning and design work in Southeast Asia, and particularly in India, where he recognized the value of alleyways for movement, trading, and social and cultural life in the fabric of regional towns. In his book on his planning and design work in India, edited by Jacqueline Traiwit, it demonstrates the ideas of the diagnostic survey, where every tree, seat, paving material, etc., is noted and documented, similar to the workings of a human body. The second drawing outlines the removal of individual buildings, the opening up of alleys, and the formation of courtyards and public spaces through what he termed conservative surgery. And in this way, a modest approach to regeneration is achieved organically rather than through wholesale demolition and complete replacement. Here is illustrated another example in Balrampur, again in India, in 1917, with the before and after plan of the city fabric, opening up alleys and alleyways with trees and small courtyards based around a large-scale water tank and public clothes washing area. In the third and final part, we move on to the contemporary city of Bangkok, capital of Thailand, and examine a range of pedestrian alleys as well as a network of klongs, K-H-L-O-N-G-S, klongs, or canals, which are essentially wet alleys. Taking advantage of this low-lying delta location of the city, as well as the historical construction of the city core through water infrastructure and transportation. The key issues arising here are the integration of alleys into the fabric of districts and neighborhoods, the continuous upgrading of alleys as the city makes preparations against climate change, flooding of the urban fabric and heat islands, and the continued occupation of the alleys for social and cultural activities such as cafes, internet points, and stormwater drainage. The land-based alleys are busy with mobile food vendors, ground-level stores, and local foot and scooter delivery traffic. It is, however, highly individual and complex, mixing public and private zones with retail and housing. This overall plan shows a central part of the city core, with the main Chao Phraya River and the number of canals that have been lost since 1932 up until 2017 in the faint dashed lines on the map. One example of these wet alleys, or klongs, is shown here, giving access to homes and businesses by rowboats and motorized skiffs for the delivery of food, services, and even people. Since 1932, many canals and sub-canals have been filled in and replaced by land-based alleys, while maintaining the original location and scale in the city fabric. Shown in this 2017 plan are newer 2 to 6 lane avenue roadways, and the network of alleys indicated again in the faint dashed lines. This is the research and design work by GSD graduate landscape architecture student Jason Liu, focusing on Bangkok's alleys and canals, reimagining and recovering Bangkok's walking spaces, and on their unique social and cultural variations as a landscape design language. It formed part of a graduate advanced studio at Harvard that I conceived and led and was carried out this spring. His first set of studies focused on existing streets and waterways through sectional studies at the human scale. Jason's project explored how to build up a design language based on Bangkok's existing street profiles, as noted on the previous slide, and how to turn alleys like acupuncture in the city into a new type of walking space that preserves the vibrant existing social activities on the ground while also opening up opportunities for stormwater management below the surface. Here are 3 sectional examples from 4 meters in width to 1.5 meters in width. However, to ground this framework closely to nowhere else but Bangkok requires examination into what local social activities will the alleys be expecting and which groups of people are targeted to use these spaces more than others. Here's an aerial image of one of the study areas, the Bang Chang Lo Alley. The strong local presence is also represented through the invisible part of an alley, the underground components. By incorporating stormwater management strategies, the alley becomes more than just a location for urban furniture, but a microecology model for the entire city. This model is expanded over other conditions such as alleys alongside retail and commercial ways, and besides existing klongs, the canals, as shown in the sections and axonometric studies. Finally, a larger approach to monsoon rainfall management and sustainable movement of water can be achieved by combining different aspects of the alleyway kit of parts to discharge it into the canals. In this way, the alleys and their renovation and reconstruction aid the larger approach to resilient and climate-based alternative futures for the city. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish all the participants and presenters and audience a very, very good event, and I hope that in time we will be able to return to meeting, talking, and discussing these important design issues in person in Seoul. Thank you very much.